Nowhere is safe for Russians anymore. Crimea, the hub of Putin's Black Sea fleet, has now become a playground for Ukraine to test its new weapons. Russians on the peninsula have now met the new Flamingo missiles that have just been integrated into the Ukrainian army's inventory. The launch of Ukraine's deep strike on Crimea on August 30th, using 3 Flamingo cruise missiles, instantly changed the tempo on the ground. These massive 7-ton missiles settled at low altitude with turbojet propulsion and advanced along a terrain-following route towards northern Crimea. The strike package exploited gaps in air defense coverage around Armyansk and approached the target at sustained speed in the final segment of its range. The Flamingos targeted Russia's most strategic security service center and naval areas in Crimea. Planning involved testing the corridor opened by reconnaissance UAVs in advance and distracting radar scans with profiles that left no electronic trace. The timing of the 3 missile launches, each carrying a 1,150-kilogram warhead, was designed to sequentially disable sensors and communication nodes within the target complex. Explosion reports indicated multiple fire points near transmitter towers and antenna groups. Ukrainian sources reported that the package maximized its impact by concentrating on a single target area and shortened the defense's reaction time. When it became clear that the main target of the attack was directly the Russian Federal Security Services, FSB, facility clusters in Armyansk, things became much more noteworthy. Initial reports from the field indicated that patrol units stationed around the base were also damaged, and that emergency evacuation procedures were initiated. Immediately after the incident, open-source images showed columns of fire and smoke continuing throughout the night, and emergency units in the area cordoned off the perimeter. The FSB complex, reported to be the target of the strikes, served as a node in a command and control network responsible for border security and coastal patrol coordination in Crimea. Radar support and radio relay points located at the base were used to coordinate patrol lines extending across northern Crimea. It was reported that after the first explosion, there were power and communication outages, and the roads around the facility were closed. Video footage showed that the explosions caused simultaneous damage to 2 different blocks of the facility and collapsed roof panels. It was stated that the fuel supply shelters at the complex were also exposed to secondary explosions, suggesting that the spread of the fire could not be controlled for some time. Meanwhile, details of the second target of the attack carried out with Flamingo missiles were being shown on screen. These missiles also targeted hovercraft boats patrolling land and shallow water areas in North Crimea. It was claimed that at least one of the Kivus A8-class boats assigned to the area was damaged, and several were taken out of service. These platforms played a critical role on the line because they enabled logistics and personnel transport in shallow and marshy areas. Therefore, their decommissioning meant a slowdown in coastal mobile patrol response and reduced surveillance intensity along the border strip. Secondary explosions and fires reported in Crimea's interior during the same night and morning hours indicated that the set of targets hit had expanded. Information came in that a Russian soldier was also eliminated during this phase of the attack, in which the hovercrafts were damaged. It was reported that there were 3 Flamingo missiles in the first phase of the operation, and that the timing of the launch was designed to divide the defense reaction. This number, when considered together with the selected target clusters and expected secondary effects, points to the search for high impact in a limited package. The strike chronology aims to take advantage of the chaos created by the first strike by placing the load on different points of the detection and prevention chain. Technically, the low-altitude flight path and terrain-following profile aim to keep radar visibility to a minimum in the final section of the long range. Multiple fires detected around the target facilities indicate that the explosion was not concentrated in a single structure. Damage reported to communication towers and antenna fields could cause a brief blind spot in the command network. Such damage necessitates the manual management of local patrol and supply coordination. Manual management prolongs reaction time and narrows the window for responding to secondary events. In such an environment, the helicopter losses reported that same night produce a multiplier effect that increases the chaos on the ground. Therefore, a 3-missile package should be interpreted as the implementation of a multi-stage response disruption concept, not a single target one. Meanwhile, the attack package carried out with Flamingo missiles also had the same chain of operations. This chain was the news that 2 Russian helicopters were shot down and destroyed around Simferopol. On the morning of August 30th, 2 Russian helicopters, Mi-24, were destroyed by unmanned aerial vehicles at Simferopol Airport, which meant a sudden drop in low-altitude patrol results capacity. This strike was assessed to have been intended to pressure the landing and intervention aircraft capacity, complementing the Flamingo attack on fixed targets. The helicopter losses directly weakened the rapid response required for the evacuation of damaged elements and the re-establishment of facility security. Furthermore, the helicopters being taken out of service will delay the movement of personnel and equipment and disrupt the planning of search and rescue and security forces directed to the scene. Satellite and open-source monitoring shared images, indicating localized fire traces around the runway and parking areas. These losses amplify the impact of damage to fixed installations on the field and slow down flight readiness cycles in the area. The partial loss of helicopter capacity narrows the air mobility template on the peninsula and requires the replanning of flight schedules. When ground forces remain dependent on helicopters for resupply and reinforcement, temporary gaps create tactical risks. Therefore, there is a direct complementarity between cruise missile pressure on fixed targets and additional pressure on rotary wing capacity. The loss of these 2 helicopters emerged as one of the signs indicating that the attack was focused not on a single facility, but on the chain of response. In this chain, the most prominent effect at the moment is that of the Flamingo missiles, rather than the helicopter losses and S-400 radar losses. To understand this effect more clearly, we can continue to look at the content we have carefully prepared. Flamingo's technical profile highlights its combination of low visibility and heavy warhead in the long-range class. Its stated range is 3,000 kilometers, and its flight profile operates in the subsonic speed band. The guidance package combines inertial navigation and satellite-aided correction to ensure route accuracy. Low-altitude routes and terrain-following algorithms reduce the likelihood of detection by external sensors. The warhead weighs over 1 ton and is designed for penetration capability against hard targets. The missile's launch configuration is suitable for flexible deployment with road-mobile platforms. This flexibility increases the surprise effect and the possibility of dispersed deployment. The target set includes energy infrastructure, radar command nodes, railway junctions, and ammunition depots. This makes it possible to produce different types of strategic effects with a single platform. Open-source technical descriptions emphasize that a balance has been established, pointing to the platform's multi-role purpose. So, to speak clearly, Ukraine's combo attacks on Crimea with its indigenous missiles and drones left Crimea's airspace defenseless. To clarify this effect, the triple strike in the last 72 hours says it all. The triple strike in the last 72 hours tells the whole story. On the night of August 28th, Ukrainian military intelligence targeted the eyes of the S-400 Triumph network in Crimea and carried out a precision strike on the 91 N6E long-range detection radar. The agency also shared an image of the struck radar. This meant the long-range detection layer was blinded. On the morning of August 30, 2 Russian helicopters, Mi-8, Mi-24, at Simferopol Airport were destroyed by unmanned aerial vehicles, which meant a sudden drop in low-altitude patrol/response capacity. On the same day, an FSB-affiliated border facility and patrol boat base near Armyansk were hit by Flamingo cruise missiles, severing the nerve endings of coastal security and the low-altitude reconnaissance line. In the late afternoon of August 31, intelligence-linked special forces announced that they had disabled critical radar/communications nodes in a package, including the S-400's 96L6AP radar, UTOS-T, MR-10M1 MIS, GLONASS Dome Complex, and RT-70. When read together, this strategy shows that blows were struck to all 3 links in the detection, command, control, prevention chain within the same window, and that Crimea's airspace experienced layer loss on this scale for the first time. Why is this critical? Because the backbone of Crimea's defense consists of the S-400, S-300 layers deployed in the area of responsibility of the 22nd Army Corps and their sensor fire elements. In this architecture, Radars such as the 91N6E and 96L6AP establish the air picture at high altitude and long range. S-300-400 launch units and 92N6 engagement radars lock onto the target, while short-range, low-altitude sensors like the MR-10M1 MIS around the coast and airfields fill in the gaps. The strikes carried out during the August 28 to 31st window took out the most critical eyes of this map. Long-range panoramic radar blindness, the deactivation of nodes such as the MR-10M1 at medium-low altitudes, and the weakening of coastal border surveillance fragmented the detect, track, engage cycle of the S-400, S-300 anti-aircraft missiles. Layered defense still exists, but the gaps are now predictable. These gaps also form the favorite corridor of a cruise missile flying with a low-altitude profile like the Flamingo, launched from a mobile launcher and carrying a high-mass warhead. The military significance of the helicopter loss in Simferopol is not just the loss of 2 aircraft. Those 2 platforms were reactive elements used for rapid deployment to visible targets, filling in low-altitude radar gaps. The UAV attack extended this response time. On the same day, the FSB border facility and patrol boat base near Armyansk, being hit by Flamingo, weakened the coastal surveillance patrol cycle. The early warning time against low-profile approaches was reduced. Subsequently, with the move on August 31st, when the 96L6AP and accompanying radar communication nodes were disabled, targeting based on the upper-layer radar image became even more sparse in the north-central line of Crimea. This created permanent tension in the detect, communicate, engage chain, the first link in the network where the 22nd Corps and airspace defense elements operate together. When seeing targets becomes difficult, the engagement window narrows. When the window narrows, it becomes harder to break up salvo or multi-axis approaches. So, does Russia have no chance against these missiles? The measures that Russian air defense would resort to under such pressure are limited but predictable. Decoy and false target dissemination, radar cluttering, and dispersing mobile elements come to the fore. Filling gaps from the air with early warning flights, such as the A-50U, is also an option. However, aircraft inventory and flight safety issues may limit the sustainability of this option. Continuously covering a large area requires simultaneous radar surveillance and proactive inventory management. Inventory management rewrites range and prioritization decisions every night. Each rewriting means another area is thinned out. The attacking side searches for these thinned-out areas with reconnaissance and deception packages. When a thinning is found, heavy weapons are deployed. This game pushes up the cost of defense and down its effectiveness. From Russia's perspective, more countermeasures are certainly possible, and the attacking side takes these into account. The Russian side can bring forward its second-line radars for air defense. Additionally, the Russians can attempt to disrupt the final approach profile of cruise missiles. Electronic jamming intensity can be increased, and GNSS access can be regionally disrupted to reduce accuracy. These measures may provide limited success against route planning combined with inertial-based guidance. The attacking side optimizes the intermediate and terminal approach profiles against such defenses. The first wave of UAVs increases the hit probability of the second wave by exhausting radar and EW resources. The second wave focuses on exceeding the repair threshold of the facility with heavy warheads. Once the repair threshold is exceeded, it may take weeks for the facility to be operational again. This delay cascades to the front lines and closes attack windows. Of course, it is also necessary to mention the Russian equivalents that could face off against the Flamingo in this arena. Cruise missiles in the Russian inventory that fall into the same category as the Flamingo include platforms such as the KH-101 and 3M14 Caliber. These platforms also offer precision strike capability at long range, flying at subsonic speeds and low altitudes. However, Ukraine's decision-making freedom gained through domestic production provides the advantage of building without being tied to external approvals for the operational calendar. This advantage facilitates target selection based on military benefit. Decision-making freedom also strengthens the element of surprise and reduces the predictability of defense. As the Russian side loses the ability to explain strikes with the narrative of external support, the language of deterrence weakens. The weakened language erodes the image of rear security in the domestic public sphere. This erosion necessitates additional spending and personnel allocation to protect industrial facilities and energy infrastructure. This necessity affects the allocation of resources to the front lines. The pressure to share resources shifts the dynamics of attrition in a long war in favor of the attacker. However, Ukraine's persistent pressure approach aims to create continuity rather than a single major strike. The reconnaissance deception strike triad, repeated night after night, makes the defense watch more burdensome. The increasingly burdensome watch accelerates the consumption of preemptive stocks. As stockpile consumption accelerates, the level of protection during critical daytime windows declines. These window declines facilitate targeting high-value targets. As high-value targets are struck, repair time and cost increase. The increase in cost works in favor of the attacker in a protracted war economy. An economy working in its favor means more frequent strikes and a broader target list. As the list expands, the claim of protection weakens everywhere in the defense. When the claim weakens, the language of deterrence gives way to excuses for defense. Kyiv's strategic message is clear and concrete. The rear area is not untouchable, and an attacking side with high freedom of decision can determine its own target list. In the case of Crimea, this reality makes the peninsula a permanent risk zone. When the risk is permanent, the defense plan is tested for sustainability. The sustainability test ultimately appears in the cost column of the war of attrition. In this column, the attacking side locks down expensive defenses with cheaper systems. Lockdown changes budget and human resource allocation. Changing allocation reduces flexibility on the front line. As flexibility decreases, tactical errors produce operational results. Operational results turn into a search for a new balance at the political table. As a result, the timing of the August 30 package can be read at the intersection of political and military calendars. Demonstrating deep strike capability on the ground is important in terms of deterrence and bargaining power. This demonstration is not limited to the tactical impact of the facility that was struck. It conveys that the rear area is not secure everywhere. When the narrative changes, defense investments shift deeper, and the front line gets some breathing room. This breathing space gives defense units on the ground room for repair and fortification. The space created facilitates the planning of subsequent ground operations. Similar effects can be observed for sea and airspace. As resources tied to the protection of coastal and port facilities increase, the support cycle for forward-deployed platforms slows down. The slowed cycle increases attack windows and expands the aggressor's range of options. Flamingo has so far shown the Russians some of these effects and possibilities. The first goal was to leave Crimea and the Russian airspace there defenseless, and this seems to have been achieved. Tomorrow, the Kremlin may get to know these missiles much more closely. For example, in Moscow or St. Petersburg. Thank you for watching.